I teach trial skills to students at Harvard Law School, right? And the thing that I tell them is when you're cross-examining, you have to control your witness. Joey just put out a point about, about him, and he allowed the guy to get away and he couldn't narrow him down. And then I keep seeing this thing, the prosecutor objects and he goes, okay, I'll rephrase. Judge hasn't even made a ruling. Why is this guy just like assuming that he did something wrong, this Goff I'm talking about, the lawyer, and just rephrasing repeatedly? And then when he seems to have a moment where he might have a little bit of a chance or idea, time to establish his theory, he lets this cop just talk and talk and talk and explain everything away.
You are watching HLN's coverage of the killing of Ahmaud Arbery jogger murder trial, something we have been following from the very beginning. I'm Shayann Malone. I do want to bring in our expert panel. Everyone is here with us: Jesse Weber, Darrin Porcher, and Vinoo Varghese. Welcome, everyone. So let's start, Jesse, with those moments there. We see, once again, defense attorney Kevin Goff upset with the prosecutor and wanting, tell us what he's doing, what he's pushing for here.
You're going to be shocked by this. I agree with him. I agree with him because, look, a witness is not supposed to testify as to their opinions on other statements that are made to another witness. What the prosecution is trying to do is to say that William Bryan was inconsistent with his statements to law enforcement, that he was trying to minimize his conduct when he realized he was in trouble. A witness can testify about what he heard, what he saw, what he was told. He can't be read something from another witness and say, oh, this is what I think. I think this is inconsistent. So Kevin Goff, as much as we kind of, criticize him here and there about some of the things he says, I think he's right here.
Vinoo, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a bigger problem here, and this is where this judge is not controlling this trial. I mean, whether he's right or not, I mean, we can talk about that. I think Jesse's raised some good points. But the problem here is that this kind of colloquy, we call it, it's a legal term, colloquy, with the bench, is going on in front of the jury. Judge, all he needs to say is objection. The judge should say approach, excuse the jury, because that's quite a bit of theatrics for the jury. And from his point of view, from the defense point of view, he's doing a great job because the prosecutor isn't stopping him. The judge isn't stopping him. So this is a problem for the prosecution here, because they should not be allowing this kind of dialogue to occur in open court. And I was like wondering, I even texted my good friend, Dr. Porcher over there. I said, is this going on in front of the jury? I just texted him. I'm like, and then I heard, oh, we'll excuse the jury at this point. So too little, too late.
Darrin, is this something you've seen before in a courtroom?
I have, and I'm a firm proponent, and I understand where the two attorneys are coming from, but you take what the defense gives you. If the court is allowing you, you continue to push in that direction, and I believe that the judge was allowing the prosecutor to continue the momentum. So from the prosecutor's perspective, I totally understand it. Take what you can get, and then let the objection come in the order, and that's when you recede, and that's when we see what happened moving forward. Remember, all of this has gotten on the record for the prosecution, and I think it's a plus for the prosecution, not a negative.
Well, yeah, good point. Yeah, if she's getting away with it and she feels like she can keep pushing, and the judge, it's his job to then step in. All right, we are excited to talk to our panel about this, and lots of details and lots of things to cover, but we'll be right back. Welcome back. You are watching HLN's special coverage of Ahmaud Arbery jogger murder trial. So I want to bring in our expert panel. We've been watching several minutes of this testimony. You have Special Agent Seacrest in the hot seat during cross-examination. Jesse, Kevin Goff, what is he trying to get at with this line of questioning? Because it does not seem to be working in his favor.
Well, what I see him doing is trying to suggest that his client was scared, that he was cooperative, that his client might not be the most intelligent, and that he was manipulated by the system and words were put into his mouth. What he's really trying to stress is that at no point did the GBI or the police think that William Roddy Bryant did anything illegal, that nothing he did warranted aggravated assault or false imprisonment, but his client was targeted and ultimately arrested due to public and political pressure. I think he's leading the ground for that. Now, it's tough to say, considering we don't even have an opening statement, so I'm guessing at this point that's where he might be going. But I'll tell you, at the very least, by amplifying his client as being so confused, it signals to me that he might not have his client take the stand, that William Roddy Bryant might not take the stand. The panel might disagree with me, but that's what I see.
Oh, Joey, what do you think? Do you disagree or agree?
So Jesse has a tremendous ability to distill and to pull out exactly what the defense is trying to do. But when you need to do that, it's failing as a defense attorney. Listen, what happens is this. You're telling a story when you're doing your cross-examination, and you want to lay the groundwork for that. If jurors have to guess, if panelists have to guess, if an anchor has to guess, you're not doing your job. What is your theory, sir? What I would be doing is talking about, it's clear to me, sir, right? You know that Mr. Bryant didn't initiate this, correct? This was the McMichaels were the ones following him, correct? And at some point, he just continued and he followed along with them, right? He did that. But you also knew that he's part of the neighborhood. And as a result of that, he knew about these other break-ins. And he knew when he heard that there was information that someone was engaged in these break-ins. My client didn't have a gun. He didn't have a rifle. The jury has to know where you're going, what you're trying to prove. And to this point, I see the prosecution hammering them with respect to you don't have the right to use the citizen's arrest law, and with respect to you engaged in cutting him off, improper, inappropriate, and illegal behavior. And that is a felony for which you're spending the rest of your life in jail. So I don't see this cross as being effective. Cheyenne, no one has a monopoly on wisdom. We all do things differently. It's a very hard job. He's in front of the cameras, etc. But what is your theory? You had so long to figure this out. Last point. You have to be organized. You have to be logical. You have to be relatable. You have to do that. And if I have to pull out, and might it be, and I think it's political pressure, and it may not, and I'm not sure, then it just doesn't do it for me. And that's my ruling.
And it just seems like he's fishing for a lot of things too, right? Because you've seen several law enforcement people taking the stand, right? This one seems very tight, very buttoned up, very professional. He's very sure of himself. He's not, foggy on certain things and his memory. He is spitting out the facts and telling everyone exactly how it is. And then he even turns to the jurors and explains, well, this is why this. It's almost like he is controlling the situation here, Vinoo.
Well, one of the things that I did was take a look at this guy, Jason Seacrest. I also took a look at the attorney, see what I could find out about them. Seacrest, he has a LinkedIn profile, and all viewers should go and take a look at this guy. He's highly educated. He's a CPA. He worked in financial investigations for Dick's Sporting Goods before he became a officer. And he's the Georgia Bureau of Investigations uses lingo that mirrors the FBI. He's the ASAC, the assistant special agent in charge. What does all this mean? Well, you have an attorney who, and I agree with both Jesse and Joey, I'm like trying to figure this out. Like, what is he doing? And he's throwing little hints out there of what he's doing. But here's the problem for him. He's got to tell the jury what his theory is. Joey was saying he's fishing. You've got to tell the jury what your theory is. He asked a question about, does he have any learning disabilities? Now, as I'm watching this, and I'm saying to myself, he's letting this witness control him. Because when he asks a leading question, he then allows the witness to explain away any advantage he got. And at one point, I thought he actually had a good point, or had a good moment, which was when he asked the agent about what was in his mind. And the agent said something about intent. And he said, oh, so you're reading his mind? And he should have hammered him. And he let him get away with that. Now, what he may be doing and what he may be setting themselves up, and there's a lot of factors going on here. I was looking at the map of Glynn County and where it is, and I texted a former intern of mine who's in law school at University of Georgia, where the attorney went. This is almost as south as you can get in Georgia. And when you look at the agent, you look at him and he's so polished, he's so good. He may not be reflective of the community, whereas this guy, Kevin Goff, who practices in Brunswick, is much more reflective. You hear it in the, shall I say, drawl and the differences in their accents. And when you look at this, he may be endearing himself to a jury, which is 11 out of 12 white jurors. and you have in a county that's at least 25% black, African American. I mean, that's as far as the latest census. So that shouldn't have happened, right? You should at least have 4 jurors of color, speaking on this jury. So what he may be doing and is trying to, endear himself to a jury. I think it's a bad move, waiving your opening, because you've got to lay out your theory. But who knows? It's a long trial.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, though, with the jurors. Let's ask Darrin that question. So how do you think he's being received with the jurors? And he, I mean both, actually, the special agent and Kevin Goff at this point.
I think Kevin Goff has a long way to go in connection with the antics that he participated in throughout the course of the trial. But when I look at the agent on the stand, it kind of brings back memories of me being on a stand as an investigator, where there was a defense attorney that was trying to hammer away at my credibility, but also focus on my trying to remove rights from the person that's accused of the crime. You heard Kevin Goff make mention to, did you Mirandize? He didn't have to Mirandize, but what Kevin Goff is trying to do is chip away from the components of Mr. Bryant not presenting himself as a willful participant in this investigation. However, it's the agent that is overly consuming Mr. Bryant in connection with the investigation. So I think he's trying to dwarf he's trying to dwarf Mr. Bryant's status in this investigation, and he's trying to prove that the investigator is just running all over him. And sometimes the juries can really be a party to this and say, hey, look, you know what? We feel for the guy, because the way Mr. Goff is presenting Mr. Bryant is that he's a person that's somewhat inept, and the law enforcement component is just running all over him. It's really difficult to make that assessment right now, because I can't see what the jury is doing in connection with being in a court. But I ultimately feel that this is lining up from the side of the prosecution and not the defense.
Oh, and he's so tight on his story and his statements, too, so that's a hard one. You'll never know. We'll see soon enough. All right, let's get back into the courtroom. I want to bring back our expert panel to discuss what is going on in the courtroom right now. So I'm going to throw this one to Darrin. It seems as though Kevin Goff is really zeroing in on this reenactment video. Special Agent Seacrest was driving during this. Did he do something wrong here? Are we missing something?
I don't think he so much as did something wrong. He's just trying to reestablish that what was done wasn't appropriate from the perspective of the special agent. I've been a part of many reenactments in the past, and they can hurt you and they can help you. But in this particular case, I don't see any genuine relevance that'll support the defense's position. If anything, I think it works more so for the prosecution, because in lending deference to the special agent, I think that he's standing tall. It seems as if he did what was necessary in accordance with moving forth the investigation against Mr. Bryant.
And I feel like, Jesse, at least it does, that video, give us, a perspective of the lay of the land. You notice a few things, narrow roads, you have no sidewalks. So when it comes to the case, all in all, he was jogging in this neighborhood, and it is confusing at points. And you even hear Gregory McMichael at one point on the 911 call, I don't know what street I'm on. Well, this is your neighborhood.
Yeah, and reenactment's never going to take the place of what actually happened that day. The problem is, with what actually happened that day, there's only a few moments that are caught on camera. Obviously, the infamous video, and then I know there was a new video that came out during the course of the trial where you actually see Ahmaud Arbery. So a walk through a reenactment can be helpful. We can't forget exactly what the defense is trying to stress here. Two things. Number one, this is a new argument, that William Roddy Bryant was so scared of the mob that he would say anything that the investigator wanted to hear for protection. Haven't heard that argument before. We're going to see where it goes. And number two, trying to stress the self-defense, right? The idea that he's driving his car, and Ahmaud Arbery, I'm going to use the word that Goff actually used here, was attempting a carjacking of William Bryant, and he acted in self-defense. That is an argument we've heard before. We're going to hear it again. It's the only self-defense argument that works for William Bryant. It is unique. I just don't know if it's going to fly at the end of the day.
I was going to say, Joey, will it work?
It doesn't appear to be. This is a very tough witness. This witness really, I think, knows their stuff and is really getting out his own theory. And remember this, when he says, for example, that as a defense attorney, he was just saying things to please you. Isn't that correct? No, he wasn't at all. And the reason I know that is because he said he didn't remember. If he was trying to please me, he simply would have indicated what I wanted him to indicate. This witness is very damaging, right, from a defense perspective to the reenactment. Fruitful, right? Because it takes you there. You have his client, Mr. Goff's client, that is Mr. Bryan, explaining where specifically he was, what was going on, what he was doing. Now, this is damning because of the fact that you look at the aggravated assault with the deadly weapon in the car. If you could establish that a death resulted from that, then you have, of course, what? Felony murder. If you could establish the false imprisonment as a result of the positioning of the car, a death resulting from false imprisonment, you have the felony murder. So I think Roddy Bryan has a lot of problems here, and I don't think his attorney's doing much to assist the problems he's having, at least not to this point.
Vinoo, what are your thoughts on this?
I teach trial skills to students at Harvard Law School, right? And the thing that I tell them is when you're cross-examining, you have to control your witness. Joey just put out a point about, about him, and he allowed the guy to get away, and he couldn't narrow him down. And then I keep seeing this thing, the prosecutor objects, and he goes, okay, I'll rephrase. Judge hasn't even made a ruling. Why is this guy just like assuming that he did something wrong, this Goff I'm talking about, the lawyer, and just rephrasing repeatedly? And then when he seems to have a moment where he might have a little bit of a chance or idea, time to establish his theory, he lets this cop just talk and talk and talk and explain everything away. I mean, that whole point about, if the guy's trying to help me, he would just go along with it. He's not doing that because he says he couldn't remember. That's an explanation that shouldn't have come out. If anything, that could have come out on redirect. But the whole point of that is that's completely, in my view, impermissible testimony that's going into the state of mind of this defendant. And he opened the door to it.
Definitely has
so at this point, I'm not sure what he's doing.
Definitely an interesting strategy, to say the least. All right, let's get back into the courtroom. All right, so looks like court is wrapping up. I want to go around the room now and get everyone's thoughts. Final thoughts on the day. We'll start with you, Joey. Tell us who you think won the day in court. All right, we don't have Joey. Let's go to Jesse. Your thoughts.
So I hope I'm not taking Joey's idea here. Believe it or not, I thought it was a win more for the McMichaels than it was for Bryan. There was testimony earlier on today suggesting from officers who were there that there was a heightened awareness of crime in that area. They brought their guns out when they were looking at the Larry English property. At the very least, it signals to the jury that there was a problem and the McMichaels knew about it. Today was a big loss for Bryan because we do not understand why he got involved there. He did not know anything about what was happening on the English property. He just saw something. He saw a guy running, saw his neighbors following him, and decided to act. Big loss for Bryan today, in my opinion.
Vinoo, do you agree?
I would agree, and as I sit here and I watch this attorney more, I'm trying to figure out if he's court-appointed or he's paid. I mean, because this guy is, again, letting this witness, the agent who also is a CPA, just dominate him. At one point, he brought up a point. At one point, he said something about, he made a comment, and the agent says, is that in the transcript? And he says, I believe it is, but I'm not going to go look for that reference now. I actually typed it out so I can get it right. To me, he's just wholly unprepared, particularly for this kind of case.
Joey, final thoughts.
Yeah, listen, I think the prosecution, Shayann, is really putting it on them. I think their theory is crystal clear. This was killing without justification, and if they establish that, they win the case. Defense hasn't shaken anything at all.
All right, and Darrin, we'll hear more from you next week. Sorry to cut you off, but court is over for the day. Thank all of you.